It is 1 year to the day since a 22-year-old Iranian Kurdish woman named Mahsa Amini died in a hospital days after the morality police arrested her in Tehran. They said she had violated Iran's Islamic dress code that requires women to wear a headscarf or hijab and cover themselves in loose, full-length clothing. Penalties for disregarding that include a fine, prison, or flogging. Her death sparked months of protest. Iran's biggest mass demonstrations is against its clerical rulers in years. Around the world today, demonstrators marched in solidarity to mark the anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death. In London, there were calls for an end to Iran's strict Islamic rule.
The regime is really brutal, so we all fighting. If it takes 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, doesn't matter, we never stop.
In Berlin, calls for another Iranian revolution, this one to depose the religious leaders who seized power in 1979. But in Iran, a much different picture. A heavy security presence sought to prevent a resurgence of last year's protests triggered by the death of Amini. The 22-year-old woman was from a small city in northwestern Iran, a member of the oppressed Kurdish ethnic minority. She died while in government detention. Iranian officials still deny it was a result of being beaten. Amini's death unleashed decades of pent-up anger at Iran's clerical rulers and their denial of social and political freedoms. Women led the protest, fed up with the restraints strict Islamic law puts on them, including telling them how to dress. Their protest mushroomed into a global movement. Women cut their hair to show solidarity. Their rallying cry? Women, life, freedom.
Until the women of Iran are free, we are going to stand with you. Jian, Azadi, women, life, freedom.
In Iran, authorities responded with a brutal crackdown. More than 22,000 people were detained. More than 500 were killed in violent clashes with security forces. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said it was all a Western plot.
I say clearly that these riots and insecurities were designed by America. They have sat down and planned this. They have planned this.
A year later, the mandatory hijab law is still in place, and authorities want to stiffen the penalties to up to 10 years in prison. And the morality police, after apparently being disbanded, resumed patrolling this summer. But on the streets of Tehran, more women, young and old, are defiantly going without the hijab.
Do you think the morality police can prevent women from not wearing a hijab? They can't impose it like before. The number of people who don't obey is too high now. They can't handle all of us.
And Mahsa Amini's name lives on. This Kurdish family named their new daughter Jina, Amini's Kurdish name, which means life.
This name is sacred because she is a sacred personality. We chose this name so that in the future my daughter knows that it's not an ordinary name and not for an ordinary person, but for an exceptional and different person.
A symbol of hope for women who want a better future. This week, President Biden announced new sanctions on Iran. In a statement, he said, "In the face of continued oppression and violence, the citizens of Iran remain committed to this movement and to their fight for a free and democratic future. Iranians alone will determine the fate of their country, but the United States remains committed to standing with them." To explore this further, Nazanin Boniadi. She's an Iranian-born human rights activist and ambassador for Amnesty International UK. She's also an actor who's appeared in many popular movies and television shows. Thank you for being with us. This protest, or this movement, began obviously over the hijab law, but has it become bigger than that? Has it encompassed more issues than that?
Thanks for having me, John. Yes, the short of it is yes. You know, Mahsa Jina Amini was not just a young woman. She was a Kurd and a Sunni. She was a member of religious and minority ethnic groups. So what her death did, and by the way, she was just a normal woman. She was just an everyday woman living her life. She wasn't killed for anything, but just expressing herself freely and living her life normally. Just for wearing her hijab inappropriately, quote unquote. And so she really became a symbol of the antithesis of a male, Shia, geriatric, intolerant ruling elite in Iran, and it galvanized Iranian society at large to stand for democracy and freedom.
We saw in the tape women going without the hijab, but also the morality police back on the streets patrolling. Has anything changed at all in the past year?
You know, we're not seeing the same numbers on the streets, but the revolution is very much alive in the hearts and the minds of the Iranian people, and Iranian society will never be the same again. Hundreds of thousands of Iranian women are currently on the streets of Iran every day in major Iranian cities, flouting the compulsory hijab law. And there are micro protests. You know, Iran's Gen Z doing things like roller skating on the streets of Iran to ABBA, to inject society with joy, because joy is a crime in Iran. Women can't dance in public, they can't sing solo in public, they can't ride a bicycle, they have to sit at the back of the bus. This is about far more than compulsory hijab, and it's become about far more than just women's rights.
Mahsa's father was detained in the past couple of days, and before he was released, he was warned not to do anything today to commemorate his daughter's death. What's life like for Iranians who are fighting the clerical rule and clerical rulers who make it clear they will not put up with any dissent?
In one word, dangerous. I mean, these families have been harassed, intimidated, silenced, imprisoned, killed, simply for demanding justice for their loved ones. You know, there's a young child, a 9-year-old, Kian Pirfalak, who was killed with bullets while the protests were happening. And his mother, who's seeking justice, is trying very hard to hold the Iranian regime to account and actually sued the government. They stopped them from commemorating their loved ones. They actually killed the mother's cousin while he was commemorating the death of young Kian. So this is the type of thing that they're dealing with, and his mother is now under house arrest.
Today, obviously, Mahsa's front of mind, the anniversary of her death. Do you worry that in the other 364 days, her memory will recede and maybe the issue will recede in a lot of people's minds in the West? I'm
very worried about that. Today, as you said, is the anniversary of her death, and we're seeing protests across the world. There's an epitaph on Mahsa Jina Amini's grave that says, "Your name will become our code." And it did, because her legacy is one of fighting for a normal life, which is the middle slogan of woman, life, freedom. We can't forget that women's rights is just one pillar of what they're fighting for. The other two being a normal life, the right to live your life in just a free way, and freedom being the last word in this slogan. And those two last words apply to all Iranians. So this has really captured the national aspiration. Now men are standing with women, and actually more young men have been killed in the past year than women. But that shows the solidarity, something that really strikes fear into this misogynistic and patriarchal regime. We heard in the statement that I read earlier that President Biden said that this is up to the Iranians. This is the Iranians' struggle and fight, but we're standing with them. The United States stands with them. Is the West doing enough to support this, do you think? In short, no. It's great. Words are great, but what we need is action. And there are a number of ways we can do that. We haven't ever been ready for the next uprising, but Iranians have risen up multiple times in the past 44 years. And every time there's now an internet shutdown, blackout, there's mass brutality and crackdown on the protesters. And what we have to do is be prepared for the next time. There will be a next time. The time between the ebbs and flows of these protests are getting shorter, and hopefully the regime will be no longer. But the Iranian people need us to ensure they have internet access, to ensure that the propaganda that these dictators in unison, Russia, China, Iran, spew and spend a lot of money on propaganda and cyber armies. We just don't have the same capacity and capability and funding to counter that propaganda. You said earlier that you thought Iranian society will never be the same, but we've also seen the leadership crack down harder and harder. Are you optimistic that things will change and change soon? You know, it's hard to predict how long this is going to take, but I think it's very clear. This is the twilight of the regime. The supreme leader is the oldest dictator and the longest dictator holding power in today's world. And his death, it will happen anytime soon. He's very sick. He's got cancer. And what happens the day after is we have to watch this space. And in the meantime, We cannot allow that vacuum to be filled with more oppression. We have to ensure that we're empowering dissident voices, opposition voices. We need a unified opposition, but we also need a multinational approach to Iran. We need an American leadership on Iran, and hopefully bipartisan support for the Iranian people.
Nazanin Boniandi, thank you very much.
Thank you.